Okay, NFL free agents can officially be signed, but the Eagles are sticking to the plan, with Howie Roseman reiterating getting younger while being confident they'll avoid mistakes from back in 2018. However, if you thought the CJ Gardner-Johnson trade didn't make sense, there's a new development showing exactly what the Birds are up to. And with Howie still on the hunt for safeties, who are a couple options to consider. Plus other updates like the reason Mekhi Becton is still with potential to return, Dallas Goedert possibly being on his way out, and everything else around Philly. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? Sorry about the voice, I'm a little bit under the weather, but let me just say this. Last week, when I made a video entitled "The Eagles are going to surprise so many and I'm ready for it," what's transpired is not exactly what I envisioned. I mean, I don't know of anyone that could have been ready for the Birds trading away one of the loudest voices in their locker room. Now, I know it's probably going to take some time to fully get over losing a guy like CJ Gardner-Johnson. After all, the dude is definitely one of one. Of course, it's not like his performances can't be replicated, and many have questioned if CJ just didn't fit Vic Fangio's system as well as Philly hoped, going with the idea of CJ hunting plays too many times outside of Fangio's structure. And who ultimately knows, but the Eagles won a Super Bowl with CJ Gardner-Johnson back there, so I mean, him not being a fit, it was definitely good enough. Plus, in just 2 seasons with the Eagles, CD had 12 interceptions. Seriously, even if you don't miss his intangibles, this is a guy who makes the defense better because of his playmaking ability. Heck, I know it's not all on him, but look at how the defense performed after CJ got kicked out of the Washington game last season. However, even with all that being true, there is a silver lining to all this. Because despite reports being this move was strictly a business decision, it looks like there's more going on than you may realize. And honestly, there's more going on than CJ realizes. With him saying there's no bad blood with the Eagles, he was just told that they eventually got to pay the young guys. Therefore, he agreed and asked to be traded to a contender and then woke up in Houston.
I don't know where I am.
Here's the problem with that alibi for Philly. Because it didn't take but a couple hours until after the trade with the Texans for guard Kenyon Green that it was announced by James Palmer that the Eagles were in on possibility of getting safety Justin Reed, as they were involved in a bidding war, and ironically, the dude is actually 1 year older than CJ. Yet it doesn't stop there, because not only were the Birds interested in Reed, but the reports are they offered Reed $22 million in guaranteed money, which, by the way, CJ's contract was 3 years for $27 million with only $10 million guaranteed.
I knew it.
The fact that Reed ended up signing a 3-year, $31.5 million deal with $22 million guaranteed with the Saints, yes, it didn't go to the Eagles, but the fact that they were actually there as players tells us what we pretty much already were surmising there. This was never about money. Now, I should mention that the Inquirer and others said the Eagles weren't ever really that close with Reed, so who knows? Yet I'd still argue just being linked to Reed tells you all you need to know. Of course, we may never hear the exact reasonings for Howie Roseman moving on from CJ. Although at least the silver lining here is that this move was premeditated, and for whatever reason, Philly wants a different safety than CJ. Also, the other interesting part to this is that even though beat writers were told Howie and the coaches are high on Sidney Brown and want to give him a shot, that's not even necessarily true. I mean, sure, I don't knock the idea of wanting to give him more snaps and see if he ends up panning out, but the fact that you're going out there trying to sign a safety like Justin Reed, again, optimistic on Sidney, but it's just a weird dynamic. Anyway, back to Sidney though, I think we all forget that he's got that dog mentality in him.
I want to be a feared player. That's kind of my mindset going into this. But then again, I just playing with that intensity every single day. I mean, you're going to connect at some point. You're going to feel it. You know what I mean? I don't want to. My intention isn't to hurt people, but if you're carrying that football, you got it coming for you.
Okay, again, initially the argument could have been made that they must feel really good about Sid. But obviously, if that were the case, then you're not looking to sign a guy who's older than CJ, would be more expensive than CJ, and heck, you don't even know for sure if he can play up to the same level CJ did. Again, like I said, this reveals what the Eagles were trying to do and are still trying to do. Howie is hunting for a safety. And in that light, even missing out on Reed, there's a few viable options remaining on the free agent market. Yes, the annual Justin Simmons rumors have started back up. And I won't dive into that topic too much because I brought him up on the previous video, yet Fangio being high on his list is noteworthy. Plus, even though he had a down year in Atlanta, Simmons is well-versed in Fangio and Christian Parker's schemes and could end up being that 1-year stopgap if Howie feels like the other long-term plans aren't the direction he wants to go. Or as Anthony DeBona brought up, there's the idea of Indianapolis's Julian Blackmon. Since the safety turns just 27 years old in August and was drafted by the Colts in 2020 when several members of Philadelphia's current coaching staff were in Indy. And at 6 foot 202 pounds, Blackmon does offer a lot to like in coverage. It's just on the run defense side that he can struggle at times to make tackles. However, this past season he was still very productive and actually played 1,000 snaps last year with a torn labrum. So yeah, maybe that's a liability coming off an injury, but it definitely shows you the type of grit and toughness this dude brings. Anyway, Blackmon's one that I could definitely get behind, but let me ask you, how are you feeling knowing now that Howie is still definitely in search of a safety? Also, you're not wrong, and there's obviously the idea of adding a safety through the draft. with multiple beat writers suggesting a potential trade-up scenario for the Eagles to go get another Philly dog in Malachi Starks. And that could very well happen, especially with the Birds in attendance at the latest Georgia Pro Day. It's just that, again, if Howie wanted to solidify the position through the draft and he knew none of the guys were going to be the answer, then how about wait until you finish the draft before trading CJ? I don't know, still one that's hard to fully wrap my head around. However, there are still more moves to come according to Adam Schefter, with him telling The Fanatic that he's expecting the Eagles to shed even more salary. And there are several options when it comes to that cost cutting. Like Anthony DeBona mentioned that he definitely feels like Dallas Goedert move is coming. Or a couple other candidates to be traded could be Bryce Huff and Jahan Dotson. Now yes, that would be a huge cap hit if they ended up trading Bryce Huff. However, it's important to know the distinction of what Howie and owner Jeffrey Lurie are doing and why. Because even though something like that very negatively affects the cap, it would end up being a big-time cash savings, which at least was the original argument for moving CJ GJ since it alleviated $8.5 million in cash this year. Again, not cap space, different thing. Consider this, over the last 10 years, the Eagles have had more cash spending than any team in the NFL. So again, I can understand trying to get more cash for what may be on the horizon. Yeah, come on, even saying that, for one, what team is going to be interested in Bryce Huff, and then also for how much?
I'll buy you bacon chips.
Look, that's why the argument of Dallas Goedert being the likely casualty makes the most sense. Still, leave it to Howie to try and find a trade, as the continued rumors are the Eagles want a 4th-round pick for Goedert. And I will say that at least Philly has several options, whether it's in free agency or via the draft, when it comes to replacing Dallas. Yet if they get rid of him, he'll definitely be missed. But no offense to him, it's not quite the concern or anxiety of the CJ GJ trade. As always, make sure to subscribe, turn the notifications on, because we'll be going live as soon as we have any moves like we've done all week. By the way, for those continuing to ask about Mekhi Becton, the good news is that he's still on the table to return to Philly, with Ian Rappaport sharing that even with Kenyon Green trade, that doesn't end hopes for a Becton return. And I'll just say thank goodness, because even though I trust Jeff Stoutland being able to turn anyone's career around or jumpstart one, Kenyon Green was basically dead last in overall pass blocking and run blocking grades a season ago. Although shout out to Johnny Page, because there are glimpses in Green's game where you see promise in at least the ground game. He just sometimes struggles to sustain blocks, but when it comes to pass protection, that's a completely different story, with him struggling all over the place and Johnny saying there's so many times where he just looks unplayable, which a lot has to do with him overthinking and looking incredibly slow. Again, if anybody can help him start using his good physical ability and traits and not overthink things, it's obviously Jeff Stoutland, but I still can't imagine that they actually intentionally play Green in meaningful snaps this season. Regardless, when it comes to playing for the Eagles, Kenny Gainwell officially won't be, since the news actually broke Tuesday night that the Steelers are finalizing a 1-year deal with Kenny G, which ultimately isn't a surprise because I felt like he'd be gone all along, especially once Samaje Perine's contract had been announced earlier in the week. But hopefully Kenny got a bag and we wish him well. Now, the immediate question that did bring up, of course, is should the Eagles add a cheap running back? And it didn't take long for Miles Sanders to get connected back to Philly after the Panthers cut him. Like the fact that this dude got a 4-year, $25 million contract to carry the ball 180 times for 637 yards and just over 3 yards per carry should be all you need to say. I mean, yeah, you could probably get Miles for cheap, but just because the idea of him and Saquon back in the same backfield is cool doesn't mean they should do it. Personally, I'm out on Sanders. Stick with Shipley as the RB2, add a guy through the draft, or heck, just have a guy that you already have on the roster. Anyway, in other news, the Eagles will designate Darius Slay and James Bradberry as a post-June 1 release. And even though there was speculation about Slay not getting a deal done with the Steelers, it looks like he'll be joining Gainwell on the trip west. Which, speaking of trips, the Eagles have now accepted an invitation to visit the White House as Super Bowl champs, with a report from John Clark being that Philly enthusiastically accepted and will end up visiting D.C. on April 28th. Again, I'm not asking for any political takes. The only reason I brought this up, people were asking if they're going and what the date would be. Here's what I will say. The last time the Eagles got invited to the White House was in 2018. But a lot of things have changed, and Howie Roseman has been very open about being too emotional and sentimental to give veteran players contracts or hold on to pieces too long that he knew shouldn't be here back then. Now, I don't know if CJ fits that bill, but the GM has clearly had a plan since the clock struck zero in New Orleans. Or okay, yeah, he's been masterminding this for a long time, well before that. Yet when you think about it, Roseman's plan for this offseason was a simple one. Stockpile on draft picks, don't even try to sign any free agents. Heck, the Eagles are the only team that's yet to do so. Also, getting younger has been the priority, along with trusting that youth, and finally put the compensatory pick formula to work. Reminder, Howie now has 19 picks over the next 2 seasons, and 7 of those are in the first 3 rounds. By the way, that could very easily turn into 20 over the next 2 years if Adam Schefter's right, with him disputing Ian Rappaport's claims, feeling that Mekhi Becton might be on his way out. Obviously, don't like to hear that, but if that's the case, still, you gotta love the fact that Howie can have some more ammunition for the draft. Also, as for the getting younger part, they've definitely done that. Look, the only projected starters who will be in their 30s on opening day are Lane Johnson, who's obviously still killing it as the best right tackle in football, and Dallas Goedert, who turned 30 in January, and who's to say if he's even still on the team by training camp. Plus, get this, the oldest projected defensive starter is Zack, Baun, who just turned 28. And even though the Eagles haven't done much in free agency, you still have to sit back and trust what Howie's doing with the other acquisitions, or at least the other moves that he's put in place. Like Reuben Franks said, he got Baun signed, he extended Saquon, he's piled up the draft picks, and he's clearly moving money to eventually extend Jalen Carter, Reed Blankenship, and Cam Jurgens. But I know, with that comes a territory, and there's definitely some elements that absolutely have not been fun to watch. Also, I do need to correct something I said earlier, because the Eagles have officially signed someone, after Jeremy Fowler reported that Ben VanSumeren was brought back on a one-year deal in Philly. Granted, he's probably not a long-term option, but I like what he brings in a spot role along with his special teams and fullback ability. Yet I get it that there's some oddity to the fact that we're hardly seeing any moves this far into free agency. However, this is Howie Roseman, and he's absolutely earned the trust, even though some moves may look entirely off base. Yet be that as it may, I appreciated Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo's honest thoughts about why the Eagles have built themselves the right way.
Maybe the run game, controlling the tempo, and just taking care of the football like the Eagles did. Maybe that's a formula that should never go out of style.
I don't think it ever will. I mean, add to that playing good defense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's all about having more points than they have at the end of the game. And I think what you're talking about, Baldy, I think it will slowly start to make its way back, and it'll be a formula. Philadelphia is probably the perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Of for exactly what you're saying. And they're built right. Listen, they got talent at all levels on both sides, and they play to the talent.
Come on, it's not every day that the opposing DC from the losing team at the Super Bowl is going to give that type of praise to the team that just beat him. But one more time, let's just trust Howie has a plan. Either way, he's far from being done, but let's get some optimism going. Let me know in the comments, take some time on this, but let me know in the comments your biggest reason for optimism, or at least just one reason for optimism for this team. We're early March. Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next one. This has been the Philly Special.